Go ahead and get started. Welcome to Fantastic Flows and Where to Find Them. I'm glad to see so many faces here still at 3:30 in the afternoon on the second day of a conference. My name is Cassie Supilowski. I'm currently the Director of Data Solutions at a nonprofit called OneGoal. So we're based out of the US. I came in from Chicago. You probably saw some of our little squad over the last couple days. You can see my Twitter handle there. I also, hopefully I did this right, have a link to these slides that you can view. So please take all of the pictures you want of slides, but know that you do have access to them right now, hopefully, and if not, definitely at the end, which will be hopefully really good because I have a lot of resources linked in here. So let's go ahead and sure, this is not the first time you've seen this slide, but we do really so appreciate our sponsors. Events like this, I've been to a lot of them, they really don't happen without sponsors. Someone once said that what you pay really just makes sure that is there to make sure that you show up, but really you don't get food, you don't get any of this unless the sponsors are here. So if you haven't had a chance to say hi to them and thank them, please take a quick minute in between this and the keynote to really just at least say thank you for being here and for making this event possible. All right, so I wanted to share a little bit about me and who's standing up here in front of you. So my background is I studied engineering, and then I taught high school science and middle school science, and then I became a Salesforce admin. So like a lot of folks in the admin and even in the Salesforce world, I kind of had that really weird, winding, non-traditional path. But I put that there to say I think that says a little bit about who I am and what I talk about and the things that I'm passionate about in the Salesforce world. That science teacher thing there in the middle really is the reason that I'm driven to do these kinds of things, because at the foundation, even if I wasn't going to be a high school teacher for life, I do really love helping people learn and teaching people, and I think that's only been amplified by the Salesforce community, and so again, that's why I'm up here. I've been in the Salesforce world at my nonprofit since 2014. I am 3-time Salesforce certified, and I think this is my 10th speaking engagement, so again, I love this. That's why I traveled to come do it. I do love Trailhead. I've been a little bit of a lull, but I'm on my road to, I think, 3 times Ranger. I think that's a thing. I lead our Chicago nonprofit user group. I'm also a lightning champion, so if you haven't had a chance to talk with Kelly, definitely go say hi to her or talk with me. I can tell you about the program. I also love Form Assembly as a product, if you've ever heard of them, so I'm also a VIP with them. So again, lots of things if you want to talk with me afterwards, non-flow, these are the things we can reach out about. So I'd love to see who we have in the room. So show of hands, how many people would identify as an admin? Cool. Any adminelopers in the middle? Awesome. Any developers? Any end users, executives, anyone who doesn't identify as one of those 3 labels? Cool. All right. Next thing. How many people have never, let's start here. How many people have never even heard of Flow? Cool. All right, we're going to get you some language and lingo here. How many people have heard of them and maybe seen it, but never opened up Flow Builder, never tried to build one? All right, who would say they have like beginner level experience with Flow? Any intermediate? Any Flow experts in the room? All right, you're a step ahead of me because I won't even say I'm a Flow expert. How many folks are on Trailhead? Awesome. If you're not, definitely make sure your hand is raised next time you're asked that question. And probably most important, how many people understood the reference in my session title? It's a Harry Potter reference, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, so Fantastic Flows. Fun fact, I literally dreamt about that one morning at 3 a.m. That's how that title came to me. All right, I kid you not, I woke up and I wrote myself an email, and that's how we got here today, because those are the things that happen when you think about Salesforce 24/7. All right, so what you can expect from today's session. I'm going to talk a little, it's going to be a little bit my flow journey. So to be perfectly transparent, I was terrified of flows for a very long time. Wouldn't open it up, wouldn't touch them, wouldn't look at them. And I was like, that's just something I'm probably never going to do. But here I am talking about flows. I'm also hoping to share with you some example use cases for your Flowspiration. So again, nonprofit side, so probably not the same lingo that you speak, but hopefully it's going to get you to start to think about how you might use it in your organization and get the wheels turning for how you might take this and turn it around for your job. I will show you at least 5 places that you can put flows and use flows in Salesforce. And again, lots and lots of resources and learning next steps. I hate to break it to you, but you're probably not going to go home this afternoon and build out this like magnificent flow just from this session, but you're going to be able to start to think about how you can get there, and that's really what we're hoping for. That being said, this session is not going to be everything for everybody, but I'm hoping that we'll keep in mind what Leah said of just being open to the opportunities and thinking about what is it that you can learn today. So what are the pieces that you can pick up? So I wanted to start with a little bit of overview of automation. So these are 3 of the 4 tools that Salesforce really talks about when they talk about automation. I left approval processes off, really, because I don't use them, and they're kind of their own bucket. But if you want to look at it, you can Google it. So workflow here is really your most basic automation. If-then statements, single thing, it's going to do one thing. You can send an email, you can do some stuff, and it starts when a record is changed. Now, just because it's simple doesn't mean it's not important and powerful. I have plenty of workflows. When I just need to do a really simple thing, it's a workflow. Kind of one of the rules that you want to keep in mind with any automation is keep it simple. Don't write code when you could use a workflow, right? Don't even use Flow or don't use Process Builder when you could do a workflow, and that kind of carries through for the different levels of our automation. Then we have Process Builder. So Process Builder, I think, came out around the time that I started as a Salesforce admin, and I fell in love with it. I was putting everything in Process Builder. I just really appreciated the visual builder in there, the like statements, and just it's like, you know, it's multiple if-then statements, but the branching is really cool. And so again, Process Builder is really powerful. You can invoke other processes from Process Builder, so you can automate things that your users need to be doing. You can even invoke a flow with a Process Builder. You can update any related record with a Process Builder. Keyword there being related, that's important. And a Process Builder is going to kick off when a record is changed or is invoked by another process, like we mentioned. Now, what you see on the Flow Builder side here, what's in red, are the things that really got me stuck. They're the things that pushed me to really start thinking about Flow. Because again, Flow is really powerful, but it is more complicated. It can be more intimidating. It's more complex, so you're going to have more branching than just if-then. You can kind of go off in all sorts of directions. You could have 10 different lines in your decision tree. My favorite thing about flows is the user interaction. So I can actually basically prompt up a screen for my users and ask them to enter information or confirm information. Flow can invoke another flow, so look at that. It's called a subflow. So that's kind of what it has in common with Process Builder. It can update any record. So again, talk about a tool being powerful. You can go there and you can start a screen, you could start a flow, and you can find any record in the system. It doesn't have to be related. So again, really powerful, but you have to understand how to do that. And then the other things I really like about Flow is it doesn't have to just be when something is edited. And we'll take a look at this couple examples, but you can do it when someone clicks a button or a link is clicked, or users access a certain page. And again, you can also kick them off from a process. So you can start to see how these things kind of layer on top of each other. So let's go ahead and talk about this little guy here. So you see my little sticker, this little robot. You're going to see that robot a couple times, multiple times, lots of times throughout the slides. What I've done for when you're looking at this later and learning Flow is I've linked in resources related to what you're seeing on these slides. So maybe it's a help text article, maybe it's a Trailhead module. I try to include some blogs from people who know Flow a lot better than I do, and where I learned some of these things from, and there's a couple Dreamforce presentations in there. So when you get these slides later, definitely take a look at the robot and see what is linked there. All right, so maybe you've heard about Flow, maybe you've never heard about Flow, but if you know Salesforce and you've heard Flow, you've probably heard of a couple terms here. We have Lightning Flow, and we have Flow Builder, and we have a Flow, and you're like, what is the difference? So this is just to break it down before we jump in any further. Lightning Flow is the product that encompasses the building, managing, and running of flows and processes. So Lightning Flow is the whole thing. That's both Process Builder and Flow Builder. You see there, Flow Builder is where you actually go to build the flow. So that's the point, the drag and drop. We'll see a picture of this in a little bit. So that's the tool for building the flow. And then the flow is the actual thing that does the thing. The flow is what your user's engaging with. It's what's automating or updating something. So in short, you can see Lightning Flow is the product that includes multiple tools. One of them is Flow Builder, and Flow Builder is where you create flows. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. There's a lot of things going on there. So these are the 4 things that we'll look at today. So login flows, flows and quick actions and buttons, Lightning app page flows, and hidden flows. So we're going to start with login flows here. So for me, I think these are the beginner flows. This is where I started. I was terrified of flows. I was like, I'm never going to build that thing. But we found a scenario in which it would have been great if we could pop up a maintenance notification to our users. And so I started there because I found a help page and I was like, this doesn't look so scary. I think I can do this. So if you haven't heard of login flows are something that direct your user through their login process before they actually get to your org or community. So that's really important and really cool is that you can use it with community users as well. It's another way to control your business process, just like flows, just like Process Builder. The only difference is that it happens at login. Once they finish whatever that flow is, whether it's a screen or it's a 10-step process, then your user is logged into the community or your Salesforce org. One thing to keep in mind is, as you might assume, you can only have one active login flow per profile, which makes sense. It can only do one thing when it logs in. But you can, again, you can build out really complex login flows that maybe reference other flows and do all sorts of cool stuff. So we'll take a look at an example of really easy, simple, like just let me build a flow and be done with it, versus some really complex ones. So some examples of what you can do with a login flow. Again, I mentioned you can show just a logo or login message. So, hey, we're updating this thing this week. Know that we're going to be down for maintenance this week. You've probably seen it if you've logged into Salesforce sometimes. When you're about to get the release, they say, hey, just so you know, you're going to have maintenance during this window. And I would say if you're thinking about starting Flow, if you've never used Flow, start here. You can also collect and update user data. So maybe you want to update contact information, their mailing address. You can also have users interact with it. You can have them complete a survey or fill out. We've used it for getting feedback from users. You can get really fancy and connect it to external services to kind of verify someone's identification. You can run a confirmation process. You can also create more granular policies. So let's say someone logs in after work hours, and maybe you want to find out why, or you want to make them do an extra thing, or you want to warn them that, hey, you're really not supposed to do this. So you can use all of the information you have in the system and pull it in there, or you can just say, hey, show this message to everybody. So you can kind of see the complexity and the scale of how much these flows, how detailed these flows can be. So this was my very first flow. That's it. And you know what? I felt really accomplished when I built that flow. I think the arms went up in the air, it worked, everyone saw it, they knew that we were updating stuff, and I was like, yes, I did it. Now, mind you, when I did it, Flow Builder didn't look like this, so if you've never seen the old Flow, whatever it was, I don't even know what it was called at the time, don't worry about it, don't ever look at it, live in this world and love it, because the new Flow Builder, thank you Shannon Hale, is just gorgeous. But you can see it starts, and the start is the login, and there's a screen, and that was it. But you know what? It did the job, and it kind of got me started on my flow journey, even if it's been kind of a long one. So the first thing you do is you build that flow, and this is the screen. This isn't what it looked like when I built it, but I added in two options here. So you can see you have two pieces here. You have a display image, so you can save an image as a static resource. If you're like, what's a static resource? Don't worry, choose the text box and just type in whatever you want to tell your user. So we use this as a maintenance notification. We said, hey, just so you know, we updated this thing, or we're going to be updating this thing. And we just set it to show to all profiles, so when they logged in, anytime it was active, they saw it. And so let's see what this looks like when you go. So login flows actually are a different spot in setup. So in a login flow, you reference a flow. So let's add another piece of language to all of the flow words. So in setup, you can go to login flows, and then you can see you just create a login flow. You give it a name, and you say what flow you want to reference. So the thing that we saw 2 screens ago was the flow that I created, start and a screen, and then I pulled it in here. I named them the same thing so I could make sure they matched up. You don't have to. And then you say what license and what profile do you want it to apply to. And so if you want it to show to everybody, you create it for every profile. And again, you can only have one active login flow per profile here. And of course, because we're in Lightning and everybody should be in Lightning, we do select to run in Lightning runtime. So let's see if this plays. So here is our login flow. You can see the text is kind of small, so you see the image that I use in the text. I would use one or the other, not both. And that's it. I finished, and now I logged in. Right? And that's what your users see. And so you can make that way more complicated. You can make them have to check a box to say that, yes, they read it, and all these things. Or you can start simple, and you can build it, slap some text on there, and say, I'm going to show it to you for the next 5 days, keep it active for 5 days, and move on. So that was my first flow. And that's kind of where I sat for a long time, because again, Flow Builder didn't exist yet. I was like, but Process Builder can do almost all the things I want to do. And so I didn't build out any flows for a while. I didn't build them out for a long time on my own. And I found that part of it was, again, there was like this level of access that I couldn't get over this hump. I was like, this just feels very developer-y. I'm not a developer. I know what a variable means in other places, but why do I have to use a variable in a flow? They want me to create a resource, and there's these things, and I didn't get it. And Dreamforce 2018, so just last September, I was sitting in a session, and pretty sure it was called Today's the Day You Learn Flow. So I felt like I just really needed to go to that session. And Jen Lee, who is amazing, she's Flow-natic. Her blog is linked at the end because she's the queen of flow. She said something and it just stuck with me, and this light bulb went off and I was like, oh. She said, flows don't know anything. They don't know anything. And I was like, I get it. You have to tell it that you want a box to put it in and then change it later. You have to create the variables. You have to create the formula and the resource and tell it what order to go in. And for whatever reason, maybe that's an aha moment for you. Maybe you're like, duh. But for me, I was like, yes, now I get it. That's why I have to structure the things that the way that I have to structure them. Flows don't know anything. You have to tell it. It doesn't know what record you're on until you tell it. It doesn't know what to do next. It doesn't know when to kick off. And that's part of what makes them so magical. And that's part of what makes them so powerful, is that you can tell it all those things and make it do some really cool things. So I wanted to share some of the jargon here again. So the resources are the placeholders for what you're going to reference throughout your flow. So it can be a variable, it can be a formula, it can be all sorts of stuff. And you basically just create the container that eventually you're going to put something in. So a variable is a kind of resource, and so you're going to put a placeholder for that. So a variable for record ID. Say, okay, I'm going to collect record ID, and at some point in this flow, I'm going to put some piece of information in you variable, but right now I just want the container. And so you have to put it there, because otherwise you try to access record variable, the flow doesn't know that you want to access that record variable. The elements are the pieces or the steps in the flow that instruct the flow what to do. So you've got interactions. We talked about screens. So that thing you saw on the screen that you saw on the login flow was an element. It's just a screen. You've got logic, so decisions where you can say, do this if this, do this if this, and that can be huge. It can be super complex. And then the connectors are what tell the flow what order to do stuff in. You'll also, and this is just the last one is just like a best practice, like make the stick in your head. For me, when you create a variable, you can choose it's like, do you want it available for input or for output? And I'm like, I don't know. When in doubt, just make it available for input, because that's going to make it speak to the system a lot easier. So that's just a little tip down there, in addition to some of our lingo. So this was just pulled from Salesforce. This is what the new Flow Builder looks like. So you see some of those pieces. You see the different kinds of interactions that you have, the different elements. You can have a screen. You can have logic where you're assigning information to variables, or you're making your decision, or you're going through a set of records. You have the data piece where you're creating records. You can update records. You can go say, hey, go get this record. So that's the piece where you go get those records that aren't related. You say, hey, go find this unrelated object that matches this information and pull that into the flow. And then you can also, like we said, delete records. So that's one thing that is very different than, I think Apex is the only other thing that can delete records. You can do that with Flow. So again, very powerful. So you want to make sure that you really want to delete something, but you can do it with a flow. All right, so let's take a look at flows in quick actions and buttons. Let's see if this one plays here. So I'm going to try to pause this for a second. Just a little background on the scenario. We have, when I work for nonprofit in education, when students leave the program, we need to know why they left, when they left, all sorts of information. And validation rules just weren't cutting it. Not everyone was updating all the information all the time. They weren't putting the right things in there. Sometimes they updated one, but then deleted it, and all sorts of stuff. So we needed to find a way where we could say, this is the information you need to update. Now, maybe some of you are saying, well, that's a quick action. And yes, we could have used a quick action, but we also had other things, other people that needed to know about that change, and other changes that needed to happen behind the scenes. So what we did instead, my colleague built this out. Again, this is still the point where I am not building out flows. She built out this flow that you say, okay, go to this button up here. It's a status update. And behind that is actually a flow. And so what it's doing is it's opening up a new page. It's asking, what do you want to do with this information? And then it's prompting the user to update the fields that we need updated. It's only showing those fields, and we can make all of those fields required. Now, we don't want those fields required on the contact layout because they're not required all the time. It's only required if you need to update that information. Now, I'm going to pause here. Oh, it went away a little bit. But one of the things that pushed us to a flow is we actually need to do something with their email address too. So depending on who's doing it, we need to contact somebody else. And so what's happening as a secondary step here is we can also put out a chatter notification to say, hey, other important person in the organization, you should know that the student has left the program. And so that's another thing that you can add into Flow. You can have a chatter notification. So that's where you start to see the power beyond some of the other more declarative things like quick actions. And so I click next, I say yep, and then it says, hey, thanks, you removed Ruth from the org. So again, that's an example of where we saw that in a button. So you saw that button right at the top, and behind that is a flow. So let's take a look at, is it going to play the same one again? Yep, let's go to the next one here. So behind the scenes, again, this is kind of a bonus where can you put flow. We mentioned flow within a flow. Now, again, we could build out all of this. We could build out one really elaborate flow, but best practice is to kind of make compact pieces that you can put together to make something. So in this case, we want to say, okay, we're on the contact record. Find out who that contact is, because remember, the flow doesn't know anything. It's sitting on that contact record, but it doesn't know what it's looking at. So it says, okay, go look up where you're at, get the information, and then let's ask the user what we want to do. So that's that start screen. It says, what do you want to do? Then based on what the user selects, it's going to launch something else. Now, right now, this only has one subflow on it. But what this allows us to do is build out other flows and attach it and drop them in here once we figure out, maybe down the road there's other scenarios for how users or students transfer between programs or whatever it might be. So again, being able to reference another flow here, you have the ability to kind of build things out and kind of piece them together. So let's take another look at an example here. This is actually, whereas we were updating the record we were on before, here we're going to create a related record. So we have GPA. You see that it asked what kind of record type do you want, and I can go back in and I can enter this information. I was able to default the date there. So I can put in today's date, I can put another date, I can hard code it. And now you see that related record of GPA is created. Now again, you might say, well, I can do that in a quick action. Well, in a quick action, you can only have one record type per quick action. Here, within one button, I was able to ask my user, which record type do you want to create? Because we're in regions all over the US. GPA scales are weird in the US. I don't know what they're like in Canada, but we've got like at least 3 right now. And so we can ask the user and then use a decision tree to say, all right, if they chose this one, create it this way. If they chose this one, create it this way. And there's developer tools and other things you can use to make that even more beautiful. Again, not a developer, so I do it with the tools that I have. All right. So 2 things I wanted to show you. So those, even though those were both buttons, they're actually built in different ways. So just want to highlight, again, some more of what is possible with flows. So this first one, the status update, that one where we saw, you had to update, when did they leave? It had that chatter notification. This was actually built out as a link. So originally we had it as a custom field on that record in a link. And then we found people were using it a lot more, and it just made more sense to have a button. So you can build out a flow as a link here. So you can see in this place, the difference that you saw there was when we removed a student from the program, it popped up in a new window, whereas when we created GPA, it popped up as like a pop-up screen in the window we were in. So again, depending on what you want, that might not be a huge difference for your users, but just showing that you have this option to create it as a link and put it into a button or into a custom field on a page. That's super helpful too. If you feel like users are already going to be scrolling down, maybe you want to have it in a link next to other fields that they might be thinking about. Or you can just create it as a flow action. So you see here this action type of flow, so it's a flow action. And then the flow we created was create a GPA record, so create that related record. And then you're just dropping that on that button. So you have the option, again, to update the record that you're on, which I would say is a good place to start, again, if you're thinking about flows. Just update some fields that are there. And it's really easy to reference the record that you're on, and so that's much more accessible. Just, and sometimes we do this as admins. Like, we have a lot of flows that we use as admins. So if you're like, I don't want to create anything to show to my end user yet, that's a little too scary, create something for yourself. What are the steps you need to do when you deactivate a user? or when, someone creates, whatever it might be. Find something that you would benefit from and start practicing with that, because if something goes, if it's not user-friendly or whatever, like, it's just you, right? Like, you maybe are the only one looking at it, or maybe just your team. So just again, wrap up on the flow action versus a quick action. So again, quick actions are great. Again, they have their place just like workflows do. But wanted to highlight a few reasons, again, the things that have pushed us to start using flow versus some quick actions. So quick actions don't have any conditional logic. So you can't say, well, based on what the person enters, then show these fields, or you can only have one record type per quick action. So if you want to create a certain kind of contact record versus another, you'd have to have a quick action for each of them. Whereas with a flow, you can create one and build that logic into the flow and tell it when to build which one. You also can't put default values in quick actions, at least not in the same way. So you might be able to get the default values from your record or from your fields, but in this case, I was able to go put in whatever date I want, and then I can also do some behind the scenes stuff. So what you didn't see happening in that flow was that in one flow, the email was cleared out because that student left the program. That field wasn't on the screen for the user. They don't need to worry about it. We know that if a student's leaving the program, that needs to change. With the GPA, based on whichever record type they choose, we set some values on the back end. And so with quick actions, anything that you want set has to be on that screen. And so being able to have that in flow is a lot better, because then you just have more power with what you can do with it. So the next thing we're going to do is actually take a look at Lightning page flows and hidden flows. And this is my first live demo, so give me a moment. Let's see if I can make this happen without anything going off the walls here. All right. So logged into my sandbox. Hopefully it stayed in. Can anyone, so we've got flows in two places on this page. Does anyone see where the flows are at? Anyone want to name where you think one might be? Chatter post, anyone else? Learning tool, clone. So clone and chatter post are two native features. Those could be flows behind the scene, I actually don't know. But learning tool and this right here, vision of excellence. So now in our org, these are the same thing. Those are just fancy words for you go and observe a teacher and you want to input what's happening in the classroom. So if we click this VOE learning tool, we're going to get a rather lengthy flow, but a really powerful tool. So our users can come in here, and my computer, of course, is being slow today. Our users can come in here, and again, you see that default value of today's date for observation. You can see we've told the flow behind the scene who the teacher is and the cohort they're in. We know who the user is, but if I happen to be entering this for somebody else, I can choose other users. And then I've got all these fields. So I'm just going to go ahead and select a bunch of these. And what I'm doing, again, this is just a related record on our end. Don't worry if you don't understand all the jargon in our nonprofit world. I've got some things that are required. I've got some things that are hyperlinked here to other Google documents if people are like, how do I rate these things? So let's go ahead and I think we've got just a few more here. Again, notice how long this is. I'll come back to this in a moment. But again, this, they don't have to go to 10 different places. They don't have to be outside the system. They don't have to necessarily come in here and like retype notes that they did in the classroom. They can come drive it right in here if they've got Wi-Fi in that classroom. And now we've got, hey, just like, thanks, great, you did a great job. You created this learning tool or this observation for astronomical. Hey, do you want to go look at the record right now? You can click right here and view it. And then if you're done, just go ahead and click finish. So again, that's similar to what we saw of having that in a button. Now, you'll notice this is a slightly different name, but internally we know this is the same. And this is the exact same flow. So I can take that exact same flow and I can drop it on a Lightning page as a component. Now, did anyone notice anything weird happen there? Anyone catch anything happening? Yeah? It was doing a little refresh. So one nice thing about Lightning pages is if you do use tabs, it's not going to load everything in the second, third, fourth tab right away, which just helps your processing. So that's just a Lightning tip. So what it was doing was it was loading everything that's on this tab. Now, if you caught it, there might have been two little things rotating there. So in our organization, we're like, hey, let's put on this button. And then we thought, would it actually be better if it was just on the page? And we wanted to start to see, well, Are people naturally navigating to the button, or are they naturally navigating to the tab? And so we wanted to say, well, who's using the tab? How often is that tab accessed? And so what was actually happening here is when I clicked on this Vision of Excellence tab, there was a hidden flow running in the background. Hidden flow running in the background. Mark Ross, again, Dreamforce 18 was a big year for me in Flow. Mark Ross introduced hidden flows, and I was like, what did you just do with that flow? That was amazing. So what we have here is a view log. So this is a custom object I built out. And so I can drop this hidden flow on different pages. And I've told it to go, when that flow is run, collect the user, collect the record ID, and then, give it a fun name. And you can see right here, 2:59 p.m. So my computer or my Salesforce is clearly on a different time zone, but that is from right now. That ran, and so you said it shows me what record ID I was on, and it tells me the name of that record in this name that I'm compiling here. It puts in my alias, and it shows me who it was created by. And the created date is just the date that ran. And so if you want to see when users are accessing certain pages, you can put a hidden flow on that page. Now every flow needs a screen. All you do is just leave it blank. And so it still loads, and when it loads, it's going to do what you told it needs to do, but it's not going to show anything. And so if you want to see what opportunities are people frequently looking at, or are there certain tabs that they're looking at? So notice this didn't run when I opened up that cohort record. It ran when I clicked on that tab, because that's where the flow is. So let's go ahead and take a look here, and I can show you where this is on the page. And show you a couple other cool Lightning things here. Another nice thing about putting it on a Lightning page is I can make it conditional. So I can say only show that flow, whether it's the learning tool one or the hidden one at certain times. And so we will see, if we look at the Vision of Excellence tab, there's two flows here. This one is referencing hidden flow. So again, I have a flow on the back end. Right now it's bare bones. It's collecting record ID, user. And I can drop it on a page, and as long as I know what pages I'm dropping it on, I know when it's running. So I might have different scenarios in which I want to collect that information. Now, one other fun thing here, again, this observation tool that we're creating, I've actually made it conditional. So it's only going to show up for certain schools and certain criteria. If it doesn't meet that criteria, then it's actually going to show this message and say, you know what, no observation is needed, so don't worry about it. And so that's just a cool Lightning feature and why it can be helpful to put some flows in certain places. So I think we're good to jump back in here. And we've got a few more slides that we can look at here. I'll take them at the end, just so we can make sure we can get through everything. So again, this is that view log flow, or the hidden flow. It says, okay, flow, go find out what record you're on, get that record information, assign the variables. So assign record ID, actually I think record ID was the only thing I was assigning there, and user. I was telling it, tell me what user is running this page. Create the view log record, pretty bare bones. Again, you can build this out more, but for what we needed, we're like, let's just, quick and dirty, let's just go find out what they're doing when they're accessing it. And then you've got a blank screen. And so that literally is, I created a screen record, and I didn't put a screen in the flow and just didn't put anything on it. So it's still going to run, but it's just not going to show anything. It doesn't need interaction. I've already told it to go create that view log anytime it's on that page. So yeah, if my user clicks back and forth or refreshes the pages, it's going to catch that. So again, if you want to build it out more and be fancier, by all means. But again, this got the job done for us. So this is what I was showing you in there in case internet did not work. And so you can also see here, again, got to tell your flow everything. You got to tell it what record you're on. If you leave this blank, it's not going to pre-fill and it's not going to pull in the information for the record you're on. It doesn't matter that it's slapped on there. You have to tell it what information you want to pass in. And then again, you see that conditional component or conditional piece for the Lightning component there. And again, you see this now on the front end, what that looks like. We see both the Learning Tool button and the Vision of Excellence tab. And because the screen that I'm on right now doesn't meet the criteria, it's actually saying, hey, don't worry about it. You don't need to worry about this flow. I'm just going to show you some text. Again, there's pros and cons of, you could do this all sorts of different ways, but some fun features there. Now again, you saw that we had both on the button and on the page layout, and so there's some pros and cons to that too. So you can also just put a flow component, I could put it on the side tab or on the sidebar in a different box in its own component, not in a tab, anywhere on the page layout. But if a flow isn't used that often, so for example, my remove a student, we only get a handful of those, every semester. So we don't want that to load on the page every single time and take up real estate on the page. So you put in a button, people just use it, they go to it when they need to do it. Again, you might not want to put it on the page itself. You might want to use a button or an action if the first element in the flow isn't a screen, right? So if I put that hidden flow on the on the sidebar, it's going to run every time that page loads, not just when they go to the Vision of Excellence tab. So where you put the flow matters. So you might have other flows that it does a couple things and it creates a record and then shows a screen. You might not want a task created every single time you go to an opportunity. You might only want it when they click the button. So again, thinking about where it makes the most sense to put your flows. And then if you have really detailed screens, so you saw the one that I did for the observation had a lot of questions on it. That's a lot to show if someone doesn't need to see it all the time. We're doing observations once a semester. They don't need to see it every other day of the year. So the button probably does make more sense, but we were kind of playing around with, does the tab work? Now components have pros too. So you saw with a component, I can make it conditionally viewed. And so I can say, hey, only show this flow if X, Y, and Z are true. Don't allow somebody to create a follow-up task if the opportunity is still in the starting stages. Or, or vice versa, or if the user is certain criteria, or if the user doesn't own whatever it might be. But you also might want to use it on the layout of the actual page if you want it to be prominent. So if you want it to be something that they do think about all the time, every time they're on that page, then you might want to put it on the actual page versus a button. So just things to consider as you're working your way through Flow. Now we're actually going to loop back to our login flows. So that flow, and this is where I start creating stuff. So that flow that we have the status update, first one we saw, again, I didn't create that. But what I did do was when we needed to update it, I said, I'll do it. Let me go try to figure this out. You've built the skeleton of it. We've got a pretty good solid foundation of this flow. Let me go in and play with it. Let me see if I can figure out how to make the updates that we need. So getting back to how I was started getting my feet wet with flows, so now we're back to login flows. Remember that first one was just a screen. Where I'm at now, we're building out login flows that are a little more complex. And so we see a login flow here, and same screen, same button. But now you're going to see a screen that actually has some interaction with our user. So it's a little small. I don't know if that's going to work. But it says, do you want to share feedback? And it says, yes, take me to feedback now. Remind me later, or no thanks. Decision on the back end is if they say, take me there now, take them to a feedback flow. Remind me later, put a date on their user record for when you want to remind them. We set it to 15 days from today. No thanks means they opt out and they never see that screen again. So in this case, I was debating, should I give feedback, should I not? Click, yep, go ahead and take me to feedback, and then I get another flow here where I get to enter information. So my user, before I even get to log in, I'm entering information. On the back end, we're logging that they did complete it. We're logging what information they entered. And then we're saying, when do we want to follow up with them again? And now you can see I'm logged in. So again, a little bit more complex. This does not want to play nice. There we go. So this is a little bit more of an intermediate login flow. But again, some cool stuff that you can do with login flows. I have this first question here of I don't have to show to the user all the time. I actually say, do I want to show the flow? And that's based on, have they interacted with it yet at all? Did they say, remind me? Did they opt out? If they say, take me to the login, then I actually, again, invoke a subflow. So the flow that actually gathers the feedback is its own flow. Now, why would I do that? I could build it on in here. But I'm actually also using that feedback flow in another place that they can access whenever they want. I'm just using this login flow when I really want them to give feedback. I'm saying, hey, you know what, it's been a while. I'm going to ask you and kind of put it in your face and say, do you want to give feedback? But at any time, they can go to another page and enter it. And it's the same flow, so I don't have to recreate it in two places. I can just, again, put those pieces together to build something out. So again, you can start to see some of those elements and how these start to get more complex. So on your flow journey, if you're thinking about, okay, this is cool, lots of information. I've just been drinking from a fire hose for the last hour. Here's how I would suggest going about flows. Because again, they're super powerful, and at some point, you're gonna need them. So I would start with a workflow and process builder. Those really are the foundation for automation. They are really gonna help you, for me, they help me understand flows that much better. And so I would suggest starting there. And again, of course, there's stuff on Trailhead about it. There's lots of stuff on there, so start there. And then I would say start with a login flow. Again, that sense of accomplishment when you build out a flow that just has a screen but it gets the job done can go a really long way. Then start to walk through, if you have flows in your organization, start to walk through the person that built it and said, you know, this is what I think it does. Does it actually do this? Or you know, if you don't have flows in your org, or you're not in an organization yet, go on Trailhead. They've got projects where you can build out flows. Start to think about those. Start to try to tweak them. You know, get your badge and then say, okay, what happens if I add this to the flow? And again, if you're still kind of fearful of getting it in front of end users, start with something that you need as an admin, or that you know, if you have your own playground at home and you're tracking your personal life stuff in there, what would be really helpful for you? Start to think about yourself as the end user. And then I would say build out a simple flow that updates a record. Updating the record that you're on is the easiest place to start with a flow. You have a lot fewer things that you need to tell the flow. And then I would move to creating a really creating a related record. Really simple, what do you need to create? What information do you need to pass through? So again, I promised lots of resources. So lots of slides, had the little robot on the bottom. That robot has a link every time. And then of course there's lots of resources here. So these are all links. Again, you have access to the slides through that bit.ly link, which I don't have in here again, but it's bit.ly/fantasticflows. So I'll leave this up for a moment. I've got the first 6 or so there are from the Trailblazer community. And then the last ones there are, we've got modules, we've got trails, and the last one, of course, leading up to like the quintessential process automation specialist. So I don't even have that one yet, but it's on my roadmap. It's what I'm working towards, hopefully by the end of 2019, to get process automation specialist. So the other thing I would ask is, with fantastic flows, hopefully comes fantastic feedback. This is the first time I've spoken on flows, first time I've done this presentation. Hoping to submit it for Dreamforce if anyone's going there this year. So if you are in the Swap Card app, definitely give feedback for all of your sessions there. If you want to come chat with me afterwards or shoot me an email or Twitter message, I would love to hear, like, you know, it would have been great if you did 2 more things, 10 less things. I really loved this piece. Wish you could have done that. I would love to hear it to really make this better and hopefully target the folks that need to see this. And with that, thank you. And I will go ahead and take any questions that folks have. I don't know if that's on or not. Yeah, thank you. Put that back up in case anyone wants to take pictures.
So on the hidden flow example, if I take your logic that flows have to be told everything to do, how did you invoke the second flow? Is it just order of operation down the list, or was there some property that invokes another flow somewhere else?
So let me see if I can get back to this real quick. So this one here, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're both running. The difference is that the first one is running without showing anything, and then the second one is just showing up. So it's not actually submitting anything. So I didn't actually, one of the faults of this is this just tells us that they went to that tab. It doesn't tell us that they actually submitted that flow on that tab. So that's a good point. And so another option is to build that logic into your flow to say, and we do this on other records, we say which record did this start from? Did it start from the home page? Did it start from a contact? Did it start from a school? And so you can build that into the flow here too, but we actually just really want to see, does someone click on it? Are they curious enough about it to find it? So yeah, that's a good point.
So they're just running independently?
Yeah, yep.
Hi, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I noticed that you're running in Lightning, which is great. But the one thing when I was starting to play with flows and I was like, okay, I'll start with screen flow. I don't know if I was just doing it wrong, but it looked like it was classic. The screen flow, I was like, okay, perfect, put it out there. I'm like, this is exactly what I want for my users. And then it showed up and it was it looked like classic. I'm used to using classic, but our users are used to using Lightning, and I don't want to put those screen flows out for them.
Yeah.
if it's going to be in a format that all of a sudden they're like, whoa, I don't understand what's going on.
And you're in Lightning.
We're in Lightning.
And
Okay,
you built
so-
it in Flow Builder?
Yeah, we built it with, so
Well,
what
yeah.
you're saying that is maybe that's not normal, and that's, have you experienced that? Like when you do your screen flows, does it look like Lightning?
It looks like Lightning.
Okay.
Maybe somebody else knows the answer, but in the back of my mind, and this like thing I think I've came across this before. I think there might be some place in setup, or it might
Okay.
be like on your profile where it says run flows in Lightning runtime.
That's okay. I know there's somewhere. I'll go find it.
Yes.
My assumption was that, oh, it just did that, but that's okay. I know. I'll
think
go
that's
figure it out.
Common classic to Lightning thing,
Yeah.
and it's somewhere. So if you Google that same thing, someone else probably can be like,
That's
"Hmm,
okay.
there."
That's enough for me to go
You're
and
not
try
alone.
and figure it out. That's good.
Go with her.
Hi. Do you have any recommendations for like the size of your flow, or how many flows can be linked together, or like how big
don't.
is too big?
Yeah, I haven't gotten that far yet. I'm still
Okay.
like, again, I'm like, still dipping my toes in, and like, I'm risk averse, so I'm like not building out these crazy things. My colleagues have built out some things that are just bananas, and they still work.
Yeah.
Again, I know Jen Lee has a really good post on how to when to create pieces versus a long flow. So I would definitely check out her blog. I forget exactly what the post is called. I think she also has other recommendations on there. Again, she was my flow inspiration. And so the only tip I will say is, and the reason that I like Flow over Process Builder is that you can bulkify a little bit more. So you can make the system run smarter and not run out of like all your processing time. And so that is definitely one thing you want to look into. But as far as size, I don't even know that I've run across anything of like your flow should only be this many components.
Okay,
But it might exist.
Thank you.
Also, one other note, if you do want to come tell me feedback, or you want to be like, hey, I filled out the feedback in the swap card, I collect lots of stickers, so I have a bag of lots of stickers in here. So if you want to be like, yes, I gave feedback, or tell me a feedback thing, I will bribe you with stickers, because I really want to make this better. So that's a side note as we're waiting for any other questions. Yes, yeah.
I'm just wondering, can you track where users drop off, like if they complete part of the flow? Or does not do that?
We don't, but I would say we don't have that many flows that have multiple screens right now. A lot of our flows are like a screen, and then there's like just a lot of stuff happening in the background where it's processing, but that's a good idea. If you have things and you want to know where they're dropping off, you could easily just throw like I think a hidden field on your screen that is like a count of the screen page or something like that. That might not be a thing, but that's where my brain goes. So I would say that's definitely possible.
Okay, thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
So awesome. The fact that you provided resources to that degree, like I'm so grateful.
So much to learn.
Yeah, and just you helping everyone navigate, and especially me. I love your presentation style. The self-deprecation's awesome, especially when you're talking to a room like this. I was just wondering, for your field of study with engineering, was it software, was it hardware, was it totally unrelated?
Totally unrelated, biomedical engineering.
Interesting.
So really the only piece that pulls into because if people are like, you were a science teacher, how does that happen? I studied engineering because I like problem solving, and I really liked math and science, and someone in my homeroom senior year was like, you should study engineering, and I said, cool. It worked out great because I do love problem solving, and that I think is most of my admin role is just like figuring things out. I mean, even when she asks a question, I'm like, ooh, that's how I would do that. So, yeah, not totally related, but.
I'll come talk to you more after, but just quick follow-up to that then. How much do you do that's hard code related? Like I'm seeing, this looks like a really easy to learn kind of framework here. When looking in depth into a command for a flow, does that really happen on this? I'm brand new to this concept, so.
Yeah, so you saw on that first screen, it was like workflow, process builder, flow, and if you're looking at like a scale of complexity, you go flow and then apex.
Okay.
And so code is the next piece, so I am dabbling in it. I think flow definitely helps you understand code, but you can build a flow totally without any code. But you can also make flow, you can make process builder speak to apex, and I think you can make code, and you can make the code speak to flows, I think. I forget all the interactions there, but flow is kind of the last thing you can do without touching code.
I love how the flows use flow charts.
Anyone else? Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I love all those questions. Those are great. And again, if you want to chat afterwards, come find me.